Alright, this is the video for TEK 6B, which is dealing with quadratics in vertex and standard form. First thing to remember about quadratic functions is they always have an x squared term. The parent function is y equals x squared. So the two different versions we're going to be looking at, vertex form is y equals, and then we're going to plug in some number for a, and then in parentheses x minus, and you plug in a number for h, close parentheses squared, so there's where that squared comes into play. And on the outside of the parentheses we have some sort of number being added or subtracted. The reason it's called vertex form is that the h and k numbers are your vertex. So you can look at this form and know exactly what the vertex is. Standard form is when the parentheses have been taken away and everything's been simplified. So there's no more parentheses and it's just ax squared plus bx plus c. So there's really not anything useful from this one. It's just these three numbers. And we'll talk about how to get that in a second. Okay, so this says write the quadratic function that passes through the point 1, 5 with a vertex at negative 1, 3. We're going to practice putting that into vertex form. So the first thing I want you to do is label your h and your k, which again is your vertex. So over here when it said vertex, this would be h, this would be k. Okay, so that step's done. And then it says label the given point. So this is just one random point. Remember, quadratics make like a parabola, so we've got the vertex and it's giving us one random point. So this is our x and our y from that point. So labeled. Okay, now it says plug in those four numbers into your formula. So up here my formula, the first thing I see is y, so I'm going to do 5 equals. Next thing is a. That's the one thing we don't have. That's going to be what we have to solve for, so a is still a. Parentheses x minus h. So x is 1 minus, now h is negative 1, so we are subtracting a negative. If you wanted to go ahead and make that a plus sign, you could. Squared plus, last bit is k, which is in this case 3. Okay, so we've labeled both our points. I've plugged them into the formula. Now it says solve for a. This is going to be the same steps pretty much every time if you follow your order of operations and how to solve for a variable. Let's deal with the parentheses first. So all of this stuff's going to carry down. We already said that 1 minus negative 1 is really like adding 1, so this is going to be a 2. Okay, now that we dealt with the parentheses, now I'm going to do my exponent. So I still have a. This is multiplying. 2 squared is 4. Okay, be careful with this. It might make more sense or be more what you're used to if you write the 4 first, like this. Okay, it is multiplication, so we're going to deal with that second. We usually, when we're solving, move the addition, do the opposite, subtract, do that on both sides. So those cancel. And 5 minus 3 is 2. Carry down the 4a. Now I can divide to cancel out the 4. Okay, those cancel. And then a equals 2/4, which if you reduce that is really 1/2. Okay, now that was just step 4, is it solve for a. Now we're actually going to, it said, remember, what it wanted us to do is write the quadratic function. So we're going to write the quadratic function in vertex form using our h and k and the a value that we just found. So if I write it all together, we've got y equals, a goes first, 1/2, and then in parentheses it's x minus my h, which again is negative 1, so you could really just put plus 1 squared plus 3. Okay, so that would be the quadratic in vertex form. Now right below it said convert this quadratic function above to standard form. So basically all we're going to do is just multiply all this out to get rid of the parentheses. So the first thing I recommend doing is taking that middle piece with the squared and rewriting it. So I've got my 1/2. Now anything squared means times itself twice. So x plus 1 squared means x plus 1 times x plus 1. And then we still have that plus 3 on the outside. So that was the first step here, was just rewriting that. Now it says distribute. So that means we're going to do x times 1. Start there. So x times x would be x squared. X times 1 would be 1x. Then you're going to do 1 times x and 1 times 1. So 1 times x would be still 1x. 1 times 1 would be 1. And all of that is still what we have in parentheses. So I'm just going to carry everything else down. Now, to make this next step a little bit easier, it might be helpful if we go ahead and combine those like terms in the parentheses. So I'm going to make that, everything else cancels. 1x plus 1x is just going to be, now we have 2x's. Okay, I still have parentheses to deal with, so we are now going to have to distribute the a value through the parentheses, which in this case is that 1/2. So 1/2 times all three of these. So that's 1/2 times x squared. That's just 1/2 x squared. 1/2 times 2x. You can definitely plug that into a calculator if you need to, but 1/2 times 2 is going to give us 1. Still have x. 1/2 times 1 is 1/2. And then carry down that plus 3. Y equals, carry everything down. Now the last thing we can do is it says combine like terms. I already did a little bit up there, so there's less to do, but these two with no x's, just constants, can combine. Definitely plug that in the calculator if you need to, but this is the same thing as 1/2 or 0.5, and this is 3, so you could do 3.5. Just to keep the fractions the same, I'm going to go ahead and put it as a fraction, but you could definitely do that in the calculator if you need to. Okay, so there is our standard form where we have an A, B, and a C. All right, so that is how we can do quadratic and standard form. Now, just to go through two quick examples on the end here with multiple choice problems. I actually do want to show you two quick ways you could do this with a calculator to kind of streamline the process. You still have this longer option, but with multiple choice, sometimes we can narrow it down a little bit faster. Okay, so first thing we're going to do on this first one. Which quadratic function in vertex form can be represented by the graph that has a vertex at 4, 1? So we know that 4 is our h, 1 is our k. So if we're looking at the formula here, the formula always said x minus h. So if I'm supposed to plug in a 4 here, it should look like x minus 4 squared. And so if you're looking at the answer choices, this says plus 4, this says plus 4, that automatically doesn't make sense. Okay, the rest of it, if I said plus 1 on the outside, that matches up with A and B. So A and B definitely are my two options. Now to figure the rest of it out, you could go through the process, plug in your H and K, plug in your X and your Y, solve for A. It's either going to be a -1 or a 1/2. But since we've got choices, the other piece of information that has to be true is that the 0.23 is in our equation. If you've got a graphing calculator available, you could always go to y equals, type in, let's just try A, so I'm going to type in -1 parentheses x minus 4 close parentheses squared plus 1, and then all I'm really going to do, because I know it has the right vertex, is figure out if it has this 0.23. So you could always go to second table or second graph and look and see, does it have a point where +2 x matches up with +3, and unfortunately that's not the right point, so I can get rid of A. So process elimination says it should be B. Just to check, let's go back. I'm going to make this become a 0.5 or a 1/2. Go back to table, and 2 matches up with 3, so that is the right answer. Okay, so when in doubt, you could always use your answer choices in a calculator and kind of make that a little bit faster for yourself. Okay, now the next one says which of the following is equivalent to this equation. Now this is in vertex form. All of the answer choices are in standard form, so this is where you could rewrite, distribute, do all this algebra. Again, I want to show you another option. So here's one option. If we just take this whole thing right here and type that into y1, so I'm going to go back to my calculator and go to y equals. I'm just going to clear that out. So we've got 3 parentheses x minus 5 parentheses squared plus 6. Okay, so that whole equation that they gave us is in y1. Now what I'm going to do is take each of the answer choices and one at a time, they're going to go into y2. So I'm just going to try A. So I'll go here, I'll do 9x squared minus 125x plus 18. Okay, so you've got the problem equation, and then I'm just trying A, and if that doesn't work, I'll try B. All right, so once you get them plugged in, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to the table, and we're going to see which y1 and y2 have matching y values. Okay, so basically if they are equivalent equations, the table should be the exact same. So I've got them both in. If I go to second table, it shows you the x column, and if these were the exact same equation, y1, y2 would have the exact same y's. Obviously these are not the same. So A is not our answer. Okay, so then go back to try B, and hopefully you get lucky at some point. You don't have to try them all. So y1 stays the same. Now I'm just going to change this to 3x squared minus 10x plus 25. Oops. Then go back to table. Those don't match either, so it's not B. Try the next one, y equals. Now this, the only big difference is the last two numbers, so I'm just going to go back and just change those. So it's a 30x, and it's a plus 81. Okay, change the table. Oh look, now they match completely, not just for 1 point, for all of them. So that is our answer. Now if you really wanted to check, you could go try D, but that will not work, so C is the answer. Okay, so you've got the longer methods on non-multiple choice questions, but if it is multiple choice, those are some nice options to kind of help you get there.